Are you tired of feeling run down? Like the world is passing you by? Maybe it's time to ask your doctor about Metagag. Metagag is clinically proven to not exist. Symptoms include pausing the video while trying to skip an ad, swelling of the face or tongue.
Okay, how many of you fell for the meta ad? Metafiction. Deadpool and She-Hulk breaking the fourth wall. Gwenpool being a walking Marvel wiki database within Marvel itself. Lemony Snicket's a series of unfortunate events, and more. While you might not be totally familiar with the word metafiction, you've definitely seen it in action. Metafiction is any work of fiction that calls attention to the fact that it is a work of fiction. Probably the most recognizable and popular instance of this would be a character looking at the camera and addressing the audience, a la Deadpool or She-Hulk. Now, you may have heard the average reader, viewer, or player refer to this as quote-unquote breaking the fourth wall. In fact, I've heard lots of people refer to all metafiction as breaking the fourth wall. But that's not the best phrase to describe the genre itself. Breaking the fourth wall is best used in reference to movies, TV shows, and even video games and stage plays. It's the idea that these mediums make up a box of sorts, where the audience looks through the fourth wall. That's right, the screen you're currently watching through would be considered the fourth wall to this video. Audiences unconsciously understand that this is a one-way window. We can look through, but the characters can't look back, which is what makes it somewhat shocking when a character actually does. And it's not just quirky winks to the camera Ferris Bueller style. If you've ever watched a surfing movie where a character shreds past and splashes droplets of water on the screen, that's a metafictional element too. It acknowledges that there's a camera, and that these events are taking place inside of a fictional medium where there is a camera. However, if you're reading a book, it's a bit more difficult to splash water on the page. That's because mediums like books, spoken word, sculpting, and music don't have walls to break, and this is where the study of metafiction takes things from a technique into its own genre. While many shows, movies, games, and books might break the fourth wall or wink at the consumer, it doesn't automatically place the work in the metafictional genre, in the same way that one fake science fact in a Western movie doesn't make it a sci-fi. Take for example, a moment in Vivzy Pop's Hell of a Boss webseries. It's very much a dark comedy series, but in episode 3, one of the most memorable moments, for me at least, was this.
Spring break is no place for young, vulnerable goth girls. You know, the kind of freaks up there who drool all over you.
And this is not par for the course for the web series, but the characters unexpectedly call out the more colorful side of the fan art community for the show. This doesn't automatically make the whole series metafiction though. Compare this with the She-Hulk comics and the Disney Plus She-Hulk show. Jennifer Walters, aka She-Hulk, got the unfortunate association as just a gender-bent Hulk by many. However, as time went on, she carved out her own identity by doing things like commenting on censorship laws with the Comics Code Authority, speaking to the audience, and she would do this for entire story arcs. Even nowadays, she's canonically still self-aware about being a comic character, but she, quote, leaves that stuff up to Deadpool nowadays. Many of She-Hulk's early comics were completely metafiction back in the day. However, while Deadpool has become the poster child for metafiction, I often hesitate to use him as an example because most people associate Wade Wilson with the more surface level elements, i.e. looking at the camera or talking to the audience, when there are way better examples, way more interesting examples of meta out there in the world. So, how do you differentiate metafictional techniques from metafiction as a genre? Is there some secret rule that once you break the fourth wall 10 times, a piece of work is metafiction? Well, no. There's not really any solid determiner for when a story is considered metafiction. However, a good rule of thumb is this: if you can remove the meta elements, and the story does not change in any major way, then it's not metafiction in genre. Likewise, if removing the meta elements from a story fundamentally changes everything, then it is metafiction in genre. Let's look at an episode of The Amazing World of Gumball titled The Signal. The city of Elmore is no stranger to bizarre happenings, but as soon as this episode starts, the viewer witnesses something that seems unintentional, a glitch, like when the TV signal has a hiccup. As more of these hiccups happen, the characters react to them.
Have you noticed anything weird lately? Like, strange things happening?
Es Consuela, necesita un doctor. Son sus riñones.
What?
On your new speedboat!
ahora.
Are you trying to be funny? Okay.
The entire episode is based around television characters reacting to a common television problem. In fact, when Gumball and Darwin discover that the TVs in Elmore experience the same glitches, they realize that they are in a TV show, before the episode abruptly and uncomfortably ends.
If what happens on TV happens to us, does it mean that we're on?
So we all got home and everything was fine. You two made up, we're all safe, and all's well that ends well.
Contrast this with Ryan Reynolds Deadpool. While he frequently breaks the fourth wall and narrates to the audience, removing these moments leaves the overall plot intact. It's still about Wade Wilson on a revenge quest against Ajax.
He got Ajax from the dish soap.
Not to mention, with the comedic Deadpool leading the charge in mainstream metafiction, people often think that it can only be used for jokes and comedy. However, it's also used in horror movies. Like, a lot, thanks to films like Scream and Cabin in the Woods.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
In the movie Scream, the characters are all genre savvy. This means that they're fully aware of tropes and cliches in the horror genre, while they themselves are in a horror movie.
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie.
An example of characters not being genre savvy would be the millionth zombie movie calling the obvious zombies something other than zombies. Seriously, you're telling me that this media-saturated society would look at a shambling corpse and go, ah yes, let us call them the infected, or the grumblers, or something ridiculous. Scream uses both the knowledge the characters have in the movie, as well as the knowledge of tropes and cliches the audience is aware of, to subvert expectations. Oh, Ghostface is on the loose? They must have some twisted backstory. But when Ghostface reveals that they really didn't have any motivation for most of the attacks, their actions become even more unsettling and terrifying. The human brain is wired to recognize patterns, so Scream using metafiction to break the patterns of tropes and cliches come across as truly scary. They're all examples of stories being metafictional in genre because they're stories that do not let you forget that you are engaging with a work of fiction. And this is actually an issue for some people. I hear a lot of artists, professors, and fans say that the mark of a good story is one that you can get lost in, to the point where you forget the world around you and melt into the world of the tale. But for a story that won't let you forget that it's a story, well, it can be jarring, or even creepy for some people. Look at a game like Doki Doki Literature Club. Dating sims are a dime a dozen, and players are used to analyzing choices to woo different characters. The player is in control. However, when Monica starts manipulating the game files and pulling info from the user's computer, like their real name, she strips away the player's godlike control. It made a huge impact when it came out, but it also had its critics. Some players didn't know just how intense the game was, even with preliminary warnings. And if you weren't familiar with many of the cliches and tropes of the dating sim genre, well, you might not understand all the things the game was critiquing. To some, metafiction comes across as just a gimmick, and I can completely understand their feelings. When I saw trailers for the Chippendale Rescue Rangers movie, I got excited. Like, really excited. It promised to display metafiction in a way that hadn't really been done since Who Framed Roger Rabbit. But as I watched the movie, I found myself a bit disappointed. They didn't use their metafictional platform to do anything meaningful. They just used it to cram in as many pop culture references as possible. And the more Hollywood uses metafiction as a way to cram in as much nostalgia bait, the more burned out people are going to become, and the less receptive people are going to be to the genre and technique. Sure, they might recognize some, but when other references fly over their heads, it feels like hearing an inside joke you're not a part of. But even metafiction used for its intended purposes can have some drawbacks. Sure, you may have constructed the most complex breakdown of filmmaking or novel writing in the world, but if no one can understand it, then no one will care. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Depending on how deep an author or creator goes, some metafiction can require some serious mental gymnastics, especially if it's not explained well, which I personally have fallen into. Metafictional elements are everywhere, and a lot of people enjoy them. However, metafiction as a genre isn't everyone's cup of tea. I've seen people comment how it can burn them out or turn them off from something. But that's the thing with art. if you try to please everyone, you'll end up pleasing no one, and there absolutely is an audience for metafiction. A passionate fan base not often catered to. The technical or difficult to grasp aspects tend to make the genre less accessible on a grand scale. But metafiction can push people to think critically about the media we consume. It forces us to go from a passive viewer to an active watcher. How would characters react if they knew thousands of people were watching them? Why do villains with guns have such bad aim? Do characters make conspiracies noticing plot holes in their world? It even extends to more important topics of representation in history, like, are we telling this type of story correctly? But I want to hear from you. Do you like metafiction as a genre or as isolated moments in the story? Do you find it exhausting or do you demand more? Let me know below, or leave an angry comment telling me everything I got wrong. Your choice.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening into today's broadcast. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and ring that bell to never miss another one of our fancy newfangled moving pictures. Tune in next week to catch another thrilling installment with AU Thor.